memory blocks will going to known as what? Orphaned memory blocks. So that situation, it is not used by anyone. So when the program is running, at that time I need to allocate and deallocate the memory space. So here I have a member function called read, whether it is defined inside the class definition or outside the class definition. So here you have to remember one thing, references is nothing but what? Alternative name for a variable. I welcome you all to the last session on pointer. So before getting into today's session, let me have a recap of previous session. So what are the topics that I have covered in the previous session? So in previous session, I have discussed regarding how can I use a pointers as a function parameter. How can I send a pointers as a function parameter or as an argument? After that, I had a discussion regarding memory allocation of a pointer. So how the memory will be allocated with the help of this pointer. After that, so there is two types, that is static allocation of memory as well as dynamic allocation of memory. So static allocation in the sense what? So when we are declaring the variable at the time of compilation, it will going to allocate the memory before it will be executed. So that means before the execution of a program, it will going to allocate the memory. But when I am working with a dynamic allocation of memory, there I have two operators, that is new and delete. So with the help of new and delete operator, I can allocate and deallocate the memory space respectively during the execution of a program. That means at the time of its runtime. So that was regarding previous session. Along with that, I had a discussion regarding what are the difference between static memory allocation as well as dynamic memory allocations. So now let me get into the today's session. In today's session, I will be discussing what do you mean by free store, that is heap memory, and what do you mean by memory leak, and how pointers and objects are related to each other, and how can I use pointers and functions. That means how pointers will going to work with functions. So these are the things that I will be discussing in today's session. So let me get into the first topic, that is nothing but what? Free store or heap memory. So free store or heap memory. So before getting into this topic, let me have one example for you all. For example, consider I have 10 students in my lab. I have 10 students in my lab, but I have only 5 laptops. I have only 5 laptops. That means I need to allocate that laptops to the students in order to execute the program. Consider I have 5 laptops and 10 students. So consider there will be 2 rows and each row consists of 5 students. I want to allocate 5 laptops for the first row. Then once they are done with their work, they have to return it me back. After that, I can allocate the same laptop for the second row student. So this will be the scenario or context. For example, you just consider 5 laptops are there and 10 students are there. I am going to allocate first 5 students to the laptop. I am going to give that 5 laptops to the 5 students who are sitting in the first row, and they will start working with the programs. Once they are done with the programs, I will ask the students, if you are done with your execution of a program, then return it me back. So at the time what I can do, so when they return me back, at the time I can use the same laptop, or I can assign a same laptop to the second row students. Then they can utilize the system. Then that means what? They can execute the program. That is nothing but what? Heap memory or a free store memory. Consider there will be 5 laptops along with 10 students. I am going to allocate first 5 students to be worked with the laptops. Once the 5 students done with their execution, they have to return it me back. Once they are done, I am going to allocate the free laptop. That means those who have finished their work, they will go off. After that, I am going to allocate the same laptop to the remaining students. So that is what the concept, that is regarding free store. There will be a pool of memory. Those who are in need, I am going to allocate. Once they are done with execution or once they have utilized the memory, then they will return it me back to the memory pool. I can assign the same used memory to someone or for the some operation. That is what this free store or a heap memory is meant. So here you can see that free store is a pool of memory available to allocated and deallocated storage for the objects that will be done during the execution of the memory. So that will be done during the execution of memory. During the execution of memory, in the sense when the program is running, at the time I need to allocate and deallocate the memory space. When the program require the memory space, I am going to allocate. When the program is done with its execution, I am going to deallocate. So every memory, whether it is allocated or deallocated, everything will be dumped in a pool. So that I am going to call that as a free store. Those who are in need, that means which program need the memory for the execution, I am going to allocate. So once they are done, they will going to dump it back to the free pool. That is regarding free pool or a heap store. So this topic is important for 1 mark question. What is free store or a heap memory? So now we'll see what you mean by memory leak. Now you just imagine, I have already told that I have 5 laptops along with 10 students. I am going to allocate first row students for the 5 laptops. Once they are done with the execution of a program, they have to return it me back. But what if one student forgot to return it me back? He will done with its execution, but he left the college or he left that lab. At that time, what I am going to think? That means the student is working with their laptop, but he left the college or he left the lab. But that laptop will remains constant in the same place. That means he is not using. But I have allocated the space or I have allocated the resource to that person, but he is not using the system. So then what will going to happen? That laptop or a resource become orphan, that is not used by anyone. So simply it is wasting of the time. That is nothing but what? Memory leak. I am going to allocate the memory, but I am not using that memory. Even though I am not deleting that memory, that means I am not deallocating that memory also. It will be allocated, but it is not deallocated or destroyed. That will be in the use, but that is not used by the program for the execution. So that situation is known as what? Memory leak. So that memory become orphan block of a memory. So it is allocated for the execution of a program, but it is not used for the execution of a program. It remains constant and it won't destroyed or deleted or dumped or deallocated. So all these things will let us know about the memory leak. So if you see here, so when creating an object, that means if the object that are allocated memory dynamically, that means at the time of its execution or at the time of its running, I am going to allocate some memory space for the object, but it is not deleted using the delete keyword. So in order to deallocate or in order to destroy the object, I have to use the delete keyword when I am deallocating it dynamically at the time of its execution. So the memory block remains occupied even at the end of the program. So I am done with the execution of a program, but I haven't deleted that memory. At that time, what will going to happen? That memory will remain constant even at the end of the program. Even the program got over, then also that memory will be allocated for the same program, but that is not used by any of the programmer or any of the operation. So that situation is nothing but what? Memory blocks will going to known as what? Orphaned memory blocks. So that situation, it is not used by anyone. So it will remain constant in the memory. It is not deallocated also by making use of delete keyword. So that kind of memory blocks are known as what? Orphaned memory blocks. Orphaned memory blocks. What will going to happen if number of memory leak increases in the system? It will going to create an adverse effect to the system. That is not so good. If you are allocating some memory space, in the sense it must be utilized by the program or it must be helped to perform any of the operation, or else if you are done with your execution, at that time you have to destroy or deallocate the memory space. Then only proper memory utilization can be happen. So this is regarding memory leak concept. So now let me get into the next topic, that is objects and pointers. Pointers and objects. What do you mean by object? You already learnt in your previous sessions or previous chapter. An object is nothing but what? It is a real world entity or it is an instance of a class. It has a copy of the class. Then how to declare an object? What was the syntax? You just recall how to declare an object. I must specify the class name and I have to specify the object name. How many objects can be created for a class? I can create n number of objects. I can create n number of objects. In order to create that more than one object, that must be separated by comma. Once I am done with the declaration of all the objects, that must be ends with semicolon. That is how the syntax will be in order to declare the object. Then how can I use a pointer variable as an object? So that is what I am going to discuss here. So the pointers, what is this pointer will going to do? So this pointer will going to points to the object. So it will going to points to the object that I can refer as a object pointer. When the pointer pointing to the object of a class, then I can call that as a object pointer or a pointer object. So what will be the syntax? You already know how to declare an object. I have to specify the class name. I need to specify the class name. Then I must specify the object name. I must specify the object name. Then how can I declare the pointer? With the asterisk symbol, that you have to remember. So with this object, I am going to give the asterisk symbol that referenced. That will nothing but what? That will referred as the object pointer. So this object pointer will going to point to this object. That is nothing but what? Object pointer. And this is the syntax in order to write the object pointer. Getting? Here I have one example program just to show you how the pointers and object related to each other. That means how can I use this object pointer in my program. So you already know how to declare the object and how to declare the pointer objects. Now we'll see one example. Here I have a class called employee. I'm going to have some data members as well as the member function. Then I'm going to create one object pointer. With the help of that object pointer, I'm going to access the member of this class. So that will be the program. So here I'm creating one class called employee. What is the class name here? Employee. What are the data members that I have? I have employee number, name and salary, and each of the data type. Employee number of the data type integer and char I'm using string, that is name of 20, and salary will be in the data type of float. So this comes under the scope of private access specifier. After that I have a public member function. So I have a public access specifier. So here I have a member function called read. Whether it is defined inside the class definition or outside the class definition, it is inside the class definition because this read function has a body within the class definition. So that read is a member function. So what are all the things that I am taking? Enter the employee number, name as well as the salary. I am asking the user to enter the employee number as well as the name and salary. So what are the variables that I am going to take in order to receive the value from the user? I am going to take employee number, name as well as the salary. After that, I am going to end the scope of this read function. I have one more function called display. Whatever the content or whatever the things that I have taken in the read function, I am going to display. So here employee number, that will be stored in empno, that is the variable name, and I have an employee name that will be stored in the name variable, and I am going to display the employee salary, that will be in the salary variable. That will be in the salary variable. I am going to end the scope of this display function. Once I am done with all the data members and member function, I need to close the scope of the class. This help me to recognize that I am going to end the scope of a class. So now I have a main function, that is void main. That is void main, where the actual execution of a program get started. So here I have a class called employee. So what does this line consist of? I am creating an object. How many objects I am creating? I am creating 2 objects. So which are the objects that I am creating here? I have a E. So whether it is a pointer object or a normal object, it is a normal one because I haven't used that asterisk symbol which is preceded by this object name, so that I can use this E as a normal object. So what is the next object that I have? I have star EP. So this represents what? I am declaring the pointer object. I am declaring pointer object. After that, I'm using this pointer object in order to store the address of another variable. You have know that pointer is a variable that will going to hold the address of another variable. What is the another variable here? E. That is also one of the object of the class employee. So this EP will going to hold the address of this E. So it will going to hold the address of this E. Whatever the content is there, that will be copied here. Okay. After that, I have a clear screen, and here you have to concentrate. So what I am doing, how to access the members of a class? What will be the syntax? I have to take the object. I must take dot operator, that is direct member access operator. Am I using that dot operator here? No. Instead of, I am using arrow operator. What I am using? I am using arrow operator. Here you have to remember one thing. If it is a normal object, then I have to use the dot operator in order to access the data members and member function of a class. But here I am not using the normal object. Instead of that, I am taking the pointer object. If I am taking the pointer object, at the time I must use arrow operator in order to access the data members and member function of a class. So what are the data members and member function that I have in this employee class? That and all you can see here. So what are the member function? Read and display are the member function of a class called employee. In order to access that read and display function, I must use object name, that is pointer object, along with arrow operator. That will help me out to access the member function of an employee class. Then here you can see that EP is a pointer object and arrow, that is help me to access the member function of a class employee, and the member functions is read and display. I am going to end the main function. So this is how pointer object will going to help me to fetch the details of a class. I hope you understood with this program. Let me get into the next topic, that is pointers and functions. How pointers are related to function. Already we know that functions are nothing but what? It is a set of lines of code that is used to perform a particular task. So what are the things that I am going to send in the function? Within the parenthesis, I am going to send some arguments or a parameter to the function. So based on that, it will going to work. Once it is done with its execution, it will return the value back to the function. So by just recalling that, now we'll see what are the methods that I'm going to use in order to invoke the functions. So how I can invoke the function? There will be two methods, that is call by value and call by reference. Already we had a discussion regarding call by value and call by reference method. In call by value method, I am going to send the whole copy of a object to the function. So that function will going to create its own copy of an object, and the execution will be takes place from that object. But by making use of this call by reference method, instead of sending the whole copy of an object, I am going to send only the address or a reference of that object to the function. That will be more efficient way of using or invoking the function. So in this call by reference, I have two more methods. In order to invoke the function, I have two more methods, that is by passing the references and by passing the pointers. So here you have to remember one thing, references is nothing but what? Alternative name for a variable. So here you have to remember one thing, what do you mean by references? It is nothing but what? Alias name, that is alternative name to the variables. So now we'll see the first method in order to invoke the function, that is pass by or passing the references. So before this one, you have to remember one thing, what do you mean by formal parameters and what do you mean by actual parameter, which I can call that as a called function and which will be the calling function. Let me take one example here. Here I have a void and the name of a function is sum. I am going to send some parameters, and this sum function comprises of set of lines that is to perform a sum operation. After that, I am going to call this sum function, and there will be some more arguments or a parameter, and this may comprises of set of lines of code. So when you look into this, at that time what it will includes, so void is the return type and sum is the name of a function. Then whatever the parameters or an argument that I am going to send in the function definition or at the time of its function declaration, then I can call that type of arguments or a parameters as a formal parameters or formal arguments. Okay, that you have to remember. Here this is a called function. So this is calling function. What I am doing, I am just calling the function. So whatever the arguments which is present in the calling function, then I can call that parameters or arguments as a actual parameters. Actual parameters. So this is nothing but what? Calling function. So this is a calling function. So just remembering this, we'll move on to this one. That is when the parameters are passed to the function by reference. So which method I'm using? I'm invoking the function. That means I'm making the function active by using the method called passing the references. So passing the references, then the formal parameters becomes the references to the actual parameters to the calling function. In the call function, I have a formal parameters. I have a formal parameters that will going to act as a references to the actual parameters. So that what I am doing here, whatever the content is there in the formal parameter, that will going to refer or that will going to act as a reference to the actual parameters. So if you see here, so when the call function does not create its own copy of the original value. So what I have calling function and call function. So in call function, that is, let me take this one as void sum of some parameters are there, and I have a calling function sum and some parameters will be there. So this is nothing but formal parameters and this is actual parameters. Actual parameters. The call function does not create its own copy of the original value. So whatever is there in the formal parameters or a formal arguments, it will not going to create own copy. Instead of that, it will going to refer or it will going to send its content to the actual parameter. So that is nothing but what? It will going to refer to the original values by the different name. For example, here I have int a comma int b. So consider this a and b as a formal parameters. So this a will going to refer. So this a will going to refer as m and this b will going to refer as n. So it won't create its own copy. Instead of that, it will going to have a alternative name. It will going to have a alias name in the actual parameter. So on this parameter, it will going to work. On this parameter, it will going to work. So you have to be careful here. So what it means, the call function, this is call function, does not create its own copy of the original value. So it will not going to create its original value. Instead of that, it will going to refer to the original value by different names. So m and n are nothing but what? M referenced as a and n referenced as a b. So this is how that invoking the function can be takes place with the help of passing the reference method. So now we'll see how can I invoke the function by making use of this passing the pointer method. So here pointers are passed to the function. The address of the actual arguments in the calling functions are copied to the formal arguments of the call function. So if you get into the previous example, there I have, let me take one more example, void swap of some arguments or a parameter will be there. Void is a return type and swap is a function name. Here I have some of the arguments, that is called function, and I have a calling function. So in calling function, I am going to send some parameters back to the called function. So these arguments are nothing but what? Actual parameters. So this is formal parameters. So here what they are saying, the addresses of the actual arguments in the calling function, where the actual parameter resides, that will be in the calling function, that will be copied to the formal parameter which is resides in the called function. So in previous method what I did, I am going to send the reference from the formal parameter to the actual parameter. I am going to send the reference of a formal parameter to the actual parameter, but by making use of this passing pointer method, I am going to copy the parameters, that is I am going to copy the address of this actual parameter to the formal parameter of the called function. So if you see here, using the formal arguments, so what is that formal arguments? That consist of original address or original values in the called function. We can make the changing the actual arguments to the calling function. So what it means, in the actual parameters, I am going to send the original value to the formal parameter. I am going to copy the content of this actual parameter to the formal parameter which is resides in the called function. So what they meant here, I am going to copy the content or I am going to copy the value of actual parameters to the formal parameter, so that if there any changes has to be takes place, I can easily make out because I am sending the original value to the formal parameter. So this is how this invoking the function can be takes place by making use of this passing the pointer method. Let me move on to the next topic, that is this pointer. What do you mean by this pointer? When I can use this pointer? When an instance of a class, that is object name and local variables, both the names are same, at that time I must use this pointer. So this pointer will going to help me to get to know that which is the object and which is the local variable of the program. So here you can see that. So this pointer is an implicit parameter to all the member function. So already we have discussed what do you mean by implicit call and what is explicit call. So this pointer will going to work as a implicit parameter to all the member function. If instance of a class and local variable both have the same name, at the time I must use this keyword or this pointer that will pointing to the actual variable, that will going to point to the actual variable. So here I am done with my pointer chapter. I hope I did my best. Though it is a complicated and tricky chapter, you have to work it on. So coming to the exam corner, here we are going to get one question from the 1 mark as well as 3 mark one question will be there. Here I have some of the important question which was collected from the previous question papers. So you can take the screenshot out of it and you have to work with it. So 1 mark question will be there along with a 3 mark question. So here in the pointer chapter, you have to recall all the sessions contents and you have to work on important concept. It's all about pointer chapter. I'm going to meet you in the next chapter with new sessions. Until that, keep learning, keep on growing. Thank you.